developed a eco type of concrete for marine environments was tragically walking. She wasn't walking. She was using a stand-up scooter in Tel Aviv, where she lived, and she very sadly was hit by a truck and passed away. So, to your point, Tessie, we don't know. We think she had three children, only 45. So we don't know what's in store for us. It really does require the seizing of each moment.
I'm so sorry. That's terrible. But yes, it's really about, what matters to you, and that is different for each and every one of us. But I think it's an important analysis that the pandemic has forced us all to do with one another and with each other. So for sure.
We are live streaming on YouTube at the moment, and we can start this amazing webinar. It is apparent that the conversation is going to be smashing. We look forward to hearing more from you, Marcy, about the program as well. And Tessie, your contributions too. So hello, everyone. Welcome to today's very special webinar as part of WHF Digital Series. I hereby celebrate All Women's International Women's Day, and I'm honored to be joined by this exceptional women who are sitting on the advisory board of the World Humanitarian Forum. Not that they need an introduction. I'm sure everyone following WHF is very familiar with them, but today I'm joined by Charlie Bronx, Vice President and Head of Marketing, Branding and Communications at Crown Agents Bank, Diane Dane, Innovation Officer at World Health Organization, Dr. Marcia Bodiciano, Global Head of Corporate Responsibility at RELX, Sarah Bowen, Global Chief Purpose and Sustainability Advisor at Marie Claire, Tessie Anthony Nassau, UNAIDS Ambassador, patron to UNA UK, co-founder of Professor Without Borders and founder of Finding Butterflies. Tessie, I don't know which title I should use, but I wanted to say all. If I'm missing anything, please excuse me. And Fatima Gailani, unfortunately had last minute change of plans given she's now a member at Afghan peace negotiations taking place in Doha, but you will be watching an interview with her in the upcoming WHF talks, which is to be released on 18th of March. And please follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletters through our website to get notification about WHF updates and releases. We are today here to commemorate International Women's Day, discuss women empowerment and gender equality. And I would like to start with the intro comments and their messages for International Women's Day. Tessie, what is your message for the International Women's Day and your opening remarks?
Thank you, Farai. Well, it's wonderful to be with all of you at a distinguished panel and fellow, also advisory board members of the most amazing World Humanitarian Forum. So thank you so much for having me. So my messages for International Women's Day, specifically for this year, is really about challenging what we are going through at the moment and just working on supporting one another more, but also men, including more men into the conversation, because I think by creating so much tension to empower women, we create inequality towards men as well, which at that point we lose also their support. So I think it is, when we talk about inequality, and I think that is one of the things we will get in with definitions, I think it's about balancing out and supporting one another really for who we are and our skills and our diversities. Man with woman, woman with woman. So that's also an important message. I always say that because still today, and I have experienced it myself, and I hear about it all the time for my mentees around the world when they write me, one of the biggest problems a lot of women have by climbing the ladder in corporate or in any other domain is other women. So it is really, I think, about supporting one another from the heart as a woman as well. I think just because, for example, I am a CEO and I have my companies, but I don't think another woman needs to suffer as much as I did to get where I am, just to be valid, to be there. And I think there's still a lot of stereotyping happening and competition because sadly today, there is not many spots on the top. So it creates that natural competition, which we actually don't want. So I think it's just to find a solution to that dilemma, really, where we create these spots on the top, and even if there's so few at the moment, while we work towards more of them, that we also acknowledge that still we need to support one another and see how we can bridge that gap until we have more of these numbers. So my key word is really support. Support for one another, and choose to challenge to support one another as well, because it's not always seen well in companies. When you see one person bullying another, then they stay away and they don't say anything. And I think that's the biggest crime. So I think the choose to challenge against bullying and not supporting one another is really, for me, one of the keywords this year. Thank you.
I'll jump in next. This is Diane. I just wanted to give, since the pandemic has happened this year, I believe it's the women that really have held the world together in our homes. And I just want to give a shout out to all the women all over the world who are silently often carrying full-time jobs and taking care of children and picking up the pieces. And it reminds me, Eleanor Roosevelt, back in the 1920s, when the Depression hit, founded an organization called American Mothers. And it was designed to elevate the role of mothers, because they were indeed holding the world together with their communities, from their families to their communities. And sometimes I think the work of caregiving, because we don't value it and it doesn't factor into the GDP, it's often overlooked, as we know. And I think that, this International Women's Day, I think we need to remember that caregiving that goes on, that's so valuable. We learned that this year. There were no teachers who cared for our children. We had to do it all on our own, and with the help of men as well. But I think it's time that we valued those roles, those unpaid roles. They don't factor into a GDP, but they literally hold the countries together. They hold communities and families together. So that's my message for International Women's Day. It's high time we learned how to factor in that work into our system and value it.
Thank you, Diane. Charlie.
Hi, thank you. And thank you again. And just echoing Tessie's and Diane's comments, you can't really articulate it any better than they have already. But just to endorse, certainly it really resonated for me what Tessie said. For me, that choose to challenge piece of the theme for International Women's Day is so vital, but it's also worth remembering there are as many men that are uncomfortable with poor behaviours around women as there are women, certainly in my experience, and I'm from a family of all boys. And I think in the workplace as well, I've seen it many times, and I've had men come to me and express how unhappy they are with certain behaviours as well as women. So I think that's a really well put, Tessie, to bring people on the journey, because we're together, we're in this together, and none of us want to be without the other. We all want to be, together. We're on one planet, and that's how we operate. So I think that recognizing that fact and bringing people together and ensuring that those people are in the room when we address those facts is really, really vital. And the other thing is being comfortable in calling something out. And I think it's easier when you get a bit older to call out poor behaviors, because you're much more comfortable with yourself. I've certainly found that. And sometimes you're a little bit concerned, when you're a bit younger, and mentoring is a brilliant way of doing that. So I think if we can all just take one more mentor and do everything 1% a bit better, if we do that every day, imagine what we can achieve. So I think actively thinking and making it a more of a conscious decision rather than something that we do unconsciously would be a really huge and positive impact, because this should be a positive conversation. I don't want to be calling people out negatively. I want to say, this is great. And if I'm uncomfortable with it, have that conversation. And I think that way we can actually help and be part of a solution rather than creating a bigger chasm. So that's my thought really for International Women's Day.
Thank you, Charlie. I would like to pass the words to Vivian Lopez, Executive Director of Every Woman, Every Child. I think you have a lot to say, Vivian, not only from the woman's point of view, but from the girls and children point of view as well. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here with all of you. And I do, again, echo what the colleagues have just said. I think for us, the key message for this year is really about celebrating women who give life and celebrating women who save lives. And, maternity did not stop for the pandemic. Motherhood did not stop during the pandemic, and it won't stop now as we're trying to recover. And I think the stress that women have faced with the uncertainties, the added pressure, living through a pregnancy, living through a childbirth, trying to nurture your children. I mean, this couldn't have been a more challenging year. And so I think it's really time to just stop and celebrate those women who continue to give life and to give, to give life and to give of themselves for their children. And then in terms of the saving lives, I mean, last year we did say it time and again, these frontline workers, these nurses, these women who truly breathed life back into so many people who suffered from this disease. And just now, I one of the very fortunate ones, I was vaccinated just yesterday. And when I walked into this large center, with hundreds of people in line and getting their first doses and their second doses, I looked around and it was all women, queuing up the people, preparing their papers, issuing the vaccines, helping them file out. I mean, it was a room of women, Army, frontline workers. We will never, never get this vaccine rollout and get out of this pandemic without women and without the important and critical role they have played throughout it. And so I just had to stop and say, wow, like where would we be without this? Where would we be without them? I mean, just tirelessly on their feet, hour after hour after hour, and with a smile on their face and providing the same guidance over and over again around, here's your vaccine, but don't forget to social distance. Don't forget to wear your mask. Don't forget to take care of yourselves. I mean, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary to kind of breathe that in. And so I think this really is a year to celebrate women who give life and save lives.
Thank you, Vivian. Very strong message. Sarah, I would like to pass over to you.
Thank you. So I think I'm a bit more activist on this one. I mean, I when I was really thinking about this, I'm like, enough is enough. Like, how amazing are women? Women have proved their magnificence, as everyone has outlined, in this pandemic. They have held the entire world together at home whilst juggling often full-time jobs, doing the household chores and everything. And something like, in the research we've done, like, women are feeling 50% more anxious and more stressed than they were before the pandemic. I mean, in countries like India, that's 66% of women. This has hit women hard. And it's just like, when are we actually going to realize, really wake up to the magnificence? We make up over half the population of the world. I mean, that's extraordinary. And, stopping climate change depends on gender equality. Achieving the global goals depends on gender equality. Businesses with more women in them on their boards and in their companies perform better. NHS vaccine rollouts work brilliantly when there are a lot of women. And it's like, it's time to wake up. We're amazing. The world needs to recognize that. And we need to kind of step up and step into our place of brilliance and magnificence, supported by men, because they can see like this juggling and extraordinariness, and we can only do this together. There is no separation. We have, and together we are stronger. So that's my message.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I can just applaud this. Marcia, over to you.
Thank you, Faye, and for your leadership of the World Humanitarian Forum, and to my amazing and inspiring fellow panelists. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm going to say something from a corporate perspective. So we have 33,000 people around the world, and we operate in about 40 countries. And companies really need to figure out what they can contribute to this agenda of equality for everyone and equality for women, gender equality. And for us, because I like to think of us as the world's knowledge company, we have a free tool, which is called the RELX SDG Resource Center. So one of the colleagues mentioned about the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm wearing my pin here. So for International Women's Day, we put out about 60 articles. These are really important. I had a chance to interview a lady named Dr. Marianne Legato, who's one of the world's experts on gender-based medicine and why we need to consider gender within medicine. I can think of other examples like amazing colleagues in South Africa who held a rule of law cafe. We do these in different places. And we were focusing on gender-based violence, what that means in the South African context and what to do about that. And I think also from a company perspective, we need to set our aspirations. And in my company, it's a journey, and we're not where we need to be, but we try every year to make improvement. And for the first time last month, we put out a suite of inclusion goals, which include gender, to increase our number of women. We're 50-50 already, pretty much, for all men and women in the company, and it's not too bad for anybody that manages somebody. But for women in leadership positions, we're about 30%. It's less for women in technology because we're a technology business. So there's more that we need to do. But I just want to flag, we need to do the mentoring. So we have a Women in Tech Mentor Program. That's fantastic. But anyone who's listening, men or women, we need to be sponsors. And I think there's a real critical distinction so that when somebody comes to us, when a young woman or a woman on any stage of her journey comes and says that they need some support, what can we do to pick up the phone, send an email, to actually help them. And if everyone had that opportunity, we'd be really raising the performance of women across the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcia. We refer to COVID-19 inevitably. It's the hottest topic in the world at the moment. We're going through a very serious pandemic. And COVID-19 has, of course, brought lots of inequalities to surface and caused many around the world, especially around gender issues. As Marcia has mentioned, gender-based violence, and globally, women have seen their levels of healthcare decreased, and also there are key workers, women key workers working in the front line, and there are other consequences at home. Do you have any examples of inequalities, gender inequality, that you have seen or experienced in this challenging time? Marcia, again, I would like to start with you, given the corporate background.
Oh, yeah. I'm also thinking about some amazing colleagues, and there's a woman, her name is Gayatri Raman. She runs our LexisNexis legal and professional business in Southeast Asia. And she has a wonderful story to tell about working with the Malaysian judicial system to go out into the jungles of Malaysia with the mobile courts. And she told me a story about a young woman who had traveled. It already takes them, my colleague and the others who were joining her on this mission a couple years ago, a lot to get to the location. But what they're trying to do is help with birth registration, establishing property rights, and she had this experience of having this young woman who had traveled so far and so long because she wanted to take a math test, but she wasn't able to sit this test because she didn't have a birth registration. So she got what she needed to get done. And then she said she couldn't even spend all that much time, saying thank you, because she had to rush back because the test was in the morning. So that's a really small example of injustice that we need to bring everyone to the same level. And here I'm very much motivated indeed by Sdg 5, which is gender equality. And when I'm thinking not only about science but also about legal challenges, I think we need to be aware of laws that may not be actually helping progress the agenda. So a 2019 World Bank report showed that when we get the laws right, it really makes a difference. That equal property and inheritance rights to women is associated with the reduction of the gender gap in labor force participation across 143 economies that report looked at. And likewise, when women are able to legally sign a contract or open up a bank account, it's positively correlated with female labor force participation. So we need to look at the structural issues and try to fix them, and then also be the change at the local level.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Vivian, I would like to pass the word over to you. I think you must have some examples to show.
Yeah, sadly, I think we have far too many examples to show the issue related to gender inequality and how the pandemic has just really shown a light and manifest. I mean, I think some of the colleagues have already alluded to this, but certainly through COVID, we've seen the enormity of the burden at work and at home that women have faced. We've seen the fragility of their economic situation. So many women in the informal market were just, so badly hit over the year because they didn't have that formal labor, that they didn't have the opportunity to continue. So that was the livelihood issue was huge. And then of course, the vulnerability in the home. I think one of the saddest early indicators that we saw was just this enormous spike globally in developing countries, in developed countries, in violence in the home. Some of it, of course, related to the pandemic and the stress and the job loss that also men face. But so much of it was just really about women being sheltered in place with abusers in the home. And I think that has been just really one of the dark sides of the pandemic, to see how little services and support continue to be available for women when they call out for help, and just the enormity of the violence that women continue to face in the home, them and their children. And so I think that has been one of the most terrible and really the darkest side of the pandemic. And then I think the last issue that I'll just raise has been around girls and education. As we know, we have never had such a disruption to the education system ever globally. I think at the peak of the pandemic, 1.6 billion children out of school. What we're seeing now, a year into this, is that the dropout rate has been high, but of course it's been higher among girls. And the concern is that once the opportunity to come back to school exists, that we will have a harder time getting girls back in school who have dropped out. And I think there needs to be a really concerted effort to make sure that girls who have fallen out of the system or have fallen behind in education are actively sought to get them back in and to help them catch up. And then, of course, the other side of the dropping out of education has been one of the sad predictors that we're seeing come to fruition, which is early marriage among girls as a way for families to kind of gain some livelihood opportunities again. And so it's hard sometimes from where we sit or from different countries to see these realities, but they have been a dark side of the pandemic. And I think efforts will be absolutely needed to get girls back on track.
Thank you. Thank you. Charlie, over to you.
I mean, I think, Vivian articulated brilliantly there a number of issues, I think, which are incredibly apparent from statistics and different reports. If you look from the violence that young women, women and girls are being subjected to. And some of it is partly because of the pandemic, and some of it is being exacerbated because of that as well. And I think bringing it back with my Tech for Good programming board hat on as well, with the World Humanitarian Forum, there's a number of initiatives there that we're discussing and talking about, about access to technology, solutions where we think it might be able to help. And all of it comes into that, it touches on global mental health, the violence piece, and it's, leaving no one behind, the ed tech piece as well. It's all connected. And I think the sooner we sort of sit back and realize just where all the dotted lines are and bring it together, we can progress it together. But it does mean that we've got to do a lot more collaboration and partnership, which I think are themes for either that have come through with the World Humanitarian Forum and the World Economic Forum and discussions that we've been having lately about partnerships. Talking about it in terms of my own experience right now, where I've seen it within our own organization, we're quite small, so I've been less affected by it. But I have noticed within the community that those in certain roles, especially part-time roles, some of them have lost their jobs, which is, and they've invariably been women. So I think the statistics, they don't lie. I'm hopeful that they will be able to bounce back. But I think it's the huge impacts are felt, especially by women, especially because they're earning less, they're at a disadvantage, they're saving less. Some of them have had to suspend or leave their careers due to childcare. And we've all got the role to play with that, especially corporations, the business community, collaborations, informal and formal, especially to ensure that inclusivity and diversity is at the core of all of our operations, and that flexibility within the working culture, which I think is going to be accelerated, funnily enough, by COVID, because people are recognizing that you can be a little bit more flexible with working hours and where you work. And that's been, I think, proved really effective, certainly for us. That's been a positive. One of the other things I think has been really important for us in a positive is how mental health has been a much more acceptable subject to address. And I'm very pleased about it. And I'm about to go on a training course in a few days with our company, where we've all been allowed to actively opt to join a mental health training scheme, where we're able to then help other colleagues or be a point, discrete point of contact, which we can use personally and professionally. So I think the more employers can do things like that, that's great. But I think we've got to do it globally. We can't just do it within our own, backyard. I think we've got to reach out, more collaborations, more partnerships. And we work in many developing countries. And I think we need to, like some of my fellow panelists have just said, do a lot more outside of our own sort of backyard. So they're my thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Sarah, over to you.
Great. So yes, I think the issues have been many and manifold, really. And at Marie Claire, we reached 91 million women and girls around the world. So we've been really trying to step in and support them during this time. I mean, gender-based violence is something we've really been addressing. How to spot the signs, what to do. And, tragically, I think, the estimates are that there have been 31 million additional cases of gender-based violence during this COVID year, which is very sobering. Also, really, thinking about kind of, girls and education. I mean, an estimated 743 million girls are out of school at the moment. So, again, what are the things that, we can do to support them and help them get it back into school? And also really helping women and girls think about different careers, not just the traditional ones. Can they have side gigs? What is their passion? What's their purpose, rather than just going back into a traditional based role? So we've had a lot of inspiration about how to do a startup or train and find new skills, which I think has been, very important. So I think, those are really kind of the main areas that we've been covering. And, really, I think upping the ante in terms of, women and girls knowing how important they are in the world, and really backing them to the hilt to give them options and information about to how to get forward. The other thing I would say, I mean, certainly, I'm covering this in one of my podcast series is again, the number of temporary workers and especially garment workers who've lost their jobs during this time. I mean, it has been quite scandalous, and campaigns like Pay Up have been addressing this, whereby, quite a lot of the large fashion companies put in huge orders before COVID hit and didn't pay for them or left things sitting on the docks. And, women, because the majority of garment workers are women, were left unpaid. And, in those countries, as we all know, if you don't get paid, you don't eat, neither do your families. And I think, it's really kind of shining a spotlight on some of those practices and really encouraging people to have some scrutiny about who they're buying from, how those companies behave, and really look to buy from companies that support women, that don't do these kind of practices. And just to remind everyone that our, purpose essentially lies in our pockets, and we're very powerful with our pockets.
Thank you, Sarah. Vivian also raised this issue of education interruption, and you all have also raised it. It is just a very important piece, I think, and for the future of girls. I will come back to that issue in a minute, but before I do that, I would like to get Tessie's and Diane's thought as well. Tessie, over to you.
So yes, well, I agree with each and every one of you. Really, really good points. So I will address the educational part through my charity, Professors Without Borders. But before that, because your initial question was about healthcare, what I have seen with UNAIDS as a global ambassador for young women and adolescent girls over the last years, but specifically during the pandemic, and they just released a new report, so please go and read it, is that now with the corona pandemic, a lot of resources that normally would have gone to the HIV/AIDS prevention and also for the resources and the testing and contraceptive, sexual health education, and all of these things, specifically in developing countries, but also in Western countries, have now ceased or have been very limited because it has been allocated to the corona pandemic needs and what has been needed there economically to pay the bills. I do understand that the pandemic is really important, but I think our government leaders have underestimated a little bit also the importance of looking at other health issues which are still happening every day. I have seen so many articles where they say, oh, cancer has decreased. It has not decreased. Cancer has decreased because people go less to hospitals. They like, even I myself, I needed to go for a screening, and I'm pregnant now, but I needed to go for a screening a few months ago to do my smear test. And they absolutely forgot me. And when I called, it was impossible to get someone on the call. And then they said, oh yeah, but you're young. It is such an unprofessionalism. I just don't know. And I know a lot of people have problems to cope with it, specifically the NHS system in the UK. I am very well aware of that. But I think, and I will include other health issues which are happening here in Europe and in the West, in the US, but also in developing countries, such as sexual health diseases. We have HIV pandemic. We have different other illnesses that are coming back, polio and others, because people don't want to vaccinate anymore, i.e. like Italy, who took it off their bill that they don't want people, well, they don't need to show anymore that they have been vaccinated for that. But to give them more rights, I think it's really, really dangerous to do something like that. And then other things such as sexual health education. Before Dr. Jumai has put in the chat a question, what about how can we empower women in African regions with tools? And I think, you know, going down to the educational part with Professors Without Borders, so my charity, is that we work in 8 regions around the world, and within these regions, Sierra Leone, Uganda, Nigeria, and Senegal are on these regions. And what we do there, we work a lot with midwives, for example. We have worked there with the Ebola crisis and other health crises with the different institutions, such as the WHO, which is very well representative in these regions as well, because they are more prone for pandemics and other health issues. And within that, we have really worked to empower these women to not only take charge of their own bodies and lives, because unwanted pregnancies, and now also because of the pandemic, the death rate of women giving birth has gone up again. Because women, firstly, they're afraid to go to the hospital, or they can't go to the hospital because there's no logistics, there's no means to get to the hospital, there's no resources, right? And then in the hospitals, they are so overwhelmed with the pandemic, even though that is another thing you hear in the papers, African leaders saying, oh, we don't have a pandemic here. If you don't test, there is no pandemic, right? So if you don't test, we don't know how many people have it. And that's a problem as well, because they don't have the resources again, because these tests and these PPE kits and everything are so expensive. They're really expensive, and a lot of people have made millions with it, right? While others can't afford to give it to their population and make sure that people are equipped, right? So I think this is all just the tip of the iceberg with what the pandemic has exposed, the inability of cooperation between countries, because the pandemic does not discriminate. And if it is in Africa, and even if we take care of it here with the vaccine, some even claim that the vaccine might not work with the DNA strains of different other genes in other countries. We have it with HIV/AIDS, right? There's different strands of HIV/AIDS, and depending on the DNA and the culture, and well, not the culture, but the DNA, how you build the biology. And I think with this virus, we're facing things like that. We have seen different strands, and all of these things. How do we reconcile that? Because if we eradicate the corona pandemic here, But if it is in developing countries, people travel and people will get around, and it will always come back because it doesn't discriminate between borders, right? So it's just, I think, the cooperation between countries, instead of showing fingers who is doing bad and then closing borders here and there and then not talking to each other and blaming, oh, France is not good and Germany and England and Luxembourg and Switzerland and so on. I think there needs to be more cooperation so that the healthcare system that we really dearly need, and also our healthcare workers, are equipped properly, educational wise, but also resource wise, and everything else that they need to brace themselves in order to tackle this once and for all.
Thank you, Tessie, for your precious comments. And over to you, Diane, on this particular topic.
Thank you so much. I think, everyone has really said it all in this conversation. Everything you've mentioned, it's exactly resonated with me. I think I want to point out that SDG 5, which is the one that impacts women, has a multiplier effect. It is actually the one, if we achieve that one, we achieve them all. And the reason is because I've come from the office of ICT within the UN before I was with WHO, and we actually did a data visualization where that was actually a fact. So, I mean, we know these things. We know these things from as old as Muhammad Yunus, where he would apply microfinance to women because they not only lift up themselves and their families and their communities and they educate their children, they pay back it's a good economic model. It's a low risk. Sometimes the investment is not there. But I also want to point out that we're facing a perfect storm here. The UN is actually going to be facing the largest humanitarian crisis since it was created, on top of the climate change and the pandemic, and women and girls are going to be we're the ones again that are left behind to clean up messes, right? We're the ones that are the caregivers that are expected to come in and help everyone. So I think, we have to remember that this is a real sense of urgency. We need to turn to our youth. We need to innovate. I chair the Innovation Fund at the World Humanitarian Forum, and I've worked with youth and innovators for the last 15, 20 years. And I am the mother of 4 children, and I'm the grandmother of 4 children. So this is really near and dear to my heart. And we have to innovate and partner with youth, and we need to move forward in a speed that we have never seen before. So all these words, they don't matter as much as what we do and our actions. And I think truly focusing on women and girls can help us accelerate the impact.
Thank you, Diane. You have summarized really what WHF has been putting forward since the beginning of this pandemic. I really cannot thank you enough at the moment for it. And probably all of you now think, Diane can't have this number of children and grandchildren. Yes, it's hard to believe, I know, but it is for a fact. I can assure you on that. Going back to the education piece, we discussed, Sarah mentioned Vivian, and so as Tessie has mentioned, again, it is quite interconnected to SDG 5 is interconnected to education as well, or vice versa, whichever we call first, really. And we all know that this pandemic has exacerbated the situation, actually caused us to get beyond and lost what we have achieved in this. So Vivian, I would like to address this question to you first, and I'm going to tie this into what Diane has said. Yes, we detect that there is an issue, there is a problem that we need to sort, but what kind of actions there should be from government point of view, from NGOs, local actors, private sector, individuals? What do we need to do really to be able to sort this issue? Because if we don't do it now, again, it is going to add up all the issues that we have all around the world. Over to you.
Thank you. That's an enormous question. And I think all of my colleagues on this panel would also have things to contribute to. I mean, I think we've got a series of stages, right? And so we can't separate the education from the health piece, right? We've got to get the vaccines out equitably to all countries and all places, because if people can't get back to work safely, we can't get kids back to school safely, right? And so it's all interlinked. So I think the issue of prioritizing teachers and the vaccine rollout is one that I cannot emphasize enough. They need to be a priority group in the vaccine rollout across countries so that they can safely get back into school and do the jobs that they're dying to do, which is to get in the classroom with their pupils and with their students. I think the issue of connectivity can't be understated as well. I think what this pandemic has shown us in the education field is that what we've done over the last year is actually widened that gap of inequity and access to education, because those who do have access either to private schooling or to pay for pods or to pay for tutors or to have access to the internet have had an advantage over those who have not. And so getting schools connected, getting households connected, getting communities connected, being able to provide that connectivity is just an absolutely essential step that all governments need to take, but they cannot do this without the support of private sector as well in this rollout. And I know that UNICEF in particular is rolling out this large giga connectivity project to try to get all classrooms, all students connected. I think that is an enormous first step. And then of course, providing that support to girls to get back into the school in particular. I think getting the children back in has to have it's not a one size fits all scenario. We're going to have to make concerted efforts to see who's fallen out, who's left behind, who needs the extra attention and care, and then make those targeted programs. And that's going to have to happen at the municipal level, primarily, and in communities supported by central government. But we can also underestimate the importance of that. I think I'll stop there, but I think, again, these are all interconnected. We've got to get people back to work safely, and that's going to mean getting this vaccine rollout out and putting teachers first and foremost as a priority group in this space. I'll stop there and let my colleagues weigh in.
Thank you, Vivian. Sarah?
So for me, I think a lot of it is just about how we view this in the world. You know, the gender inequality that's going on at the moment, that it's viewed as a bit of a moral problem, right? And it's like, oh dear, you know, this is what's happening. But actually, when you really, really get down to it, you know, the economic point of view is absolutely massive. And if people won't respond to the moral argument, let's present the economic one. I mean, you know, the statistics are that if we actually achieve goal 5, we can add $28 trillion to the global annual GDP by 2025. I mean, like, amazing, right? You know, I mean, like, you know, as I said before, you know, women on boards, if you have equal number of women on boards, those companies tend to perform 50% better. The share prices go up. I mean, it's not, you know, this isn't just a nice to have, this is an essential to have. And I think that's the level we need to talk about it, because, you know, when I think governments realize that the contribution that they are missing out on by not doing this, by corporates doing the same, then it's like, it's a no-brainer. I mean, like, you know, every government should be supporting their women and girls. You know, they should be nurturing those green shoots. Every corporate with those kind of statistics should be actively recruiting women and making sure that they have gender balanced boards and companies. So really, that's my point of view. It's like, let's really talk the numbers. You know, if they won't go for it just because, you know, it's nice to have more women around or that moral case. You know, let's hit them with the hard facts.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just add one thing to what Sarah said? Sarah, oh my goodness, I could not agree more with you. I have to say, I think there's this giant sinkhole in the economy of care, where I raised 4 children, so you know that. So my daughter works for McKinsey, but McKinsey is not coming back to me and saying, hey, thanks for spending 20 years raising this daughter that's now making us millions of dollars, right? And so there's some sunk economics in the role of caregiving that is not valued because it does not value into a GDP. But if we were to solve that, if we were to actually take some innovative technology that now measured this, all the caregiving going on, let's say by data points through blockchain, and you could actually connect the dots there and prove to a government that it's truly valuable, all the care that's going in, and they can measure it and they can I don't know what policies could be made, but I do know that that's the key. That's the key to equalizing opportunity for women, because when we have this giant population of women and the labor, the amount that have dropped out of the job market this year is massive, and it's because they're breaking down. We can't care for everything and then maintain a job at the same time. It's extremely challenging. So, this is at the core of everything, and we quite often don't talk about it. This role of being a mother is essential to equalizing everything else. And the feminist movement to be honest, didn't incorporate that because it was seen as something that was holding us back. But honestly, when we don't talk about it, we don't equalize it and provide value for it. So sorry to jump in there, but just had to add to your comments.
I have also something to add, actually, which would go as well with my contribution for the question, actually, if you allow. So I totally agree with both of you, Sarah and Diana. Before I get to you, I just want to say to Vivian, when you say everyone needs to get the vaccine and so we can get on with work, right? Totally agree with you, but let me tell you the reality. Here in the UK, when they called me when I arrived, right? And I said, so if I have the vaccine, do I still need to quarantine? And they said, yes. And I said, so why? Why do I need to quarantine if I have the vaccine? Because if I have the vaccine, I obviously can't give it to other people anymore. I'm kind of like safe. That is why you have the vaccine. We were waiting for that for a year now. And the only thing he said, I'm sorry, I'm a low-paid government worker and I'm just reading a paper. I have no clue. And that is the problem. Yes, vaccine, I agree with you 100%. But the other problem is they want to roll out the vaccine and want to look good in the papers that they have done it and say we have vaccinated millions of people. But then here in the UK, if you have a vaccine, apparently you still need to be home. So what's the problem to that, right? What do we do there? So that's one thing there, which I think is just blows my mind. And I just don't understand the logic behind that. Then we go to Sarah and Diana. I totally agree with you. And you have mentioned it several times before. I myself am the mother of 2 teenage boys. My son will be 15. I have a 13-year-old. I have a stepdaughter who's 13. And I'm expecting a little baby for the summer. So what I have seen in the US, which I really like, which I'm a very big advocate for, and I will advocate for that, and I have advocated for that at least since my kids were babies 15 years ago, is they call it the Marshall Plan for Mothers, which is actually specifically about let's pay mothers to stay at home, to raise the future leaders of our society. As you said, Diane, your daughter making millions for her company. Thank you, Diane. Because of you, she's there. Our politicians, right? President Biden had a mom. Other people had a mom, right? My kids have a mom. I have sacrificed years being home with my kids, and I love it. I would not take it back. But at the same time, it was still sometimes struggling. I know a lot of women who are struggling because they want to raise their kids and they need to actually choose, because if they go to work, they pay more to kindergarten to bring their kids there to have the salary that they get at the end of the month. Like, it is crazy, but they still need to work, because otherwise in your CV, when you apply for a job, then 5 years later, they say, ooh, you had a gap of 5 years. What were you doing? Because being a mother is just not good enough. And that makes me furious. So if any of you want to join and create a team and a campaign for that Marshall Plan for Mothers and get us freaking paid for being mothers, for being cooks, psychologists, educators, cleaners, everything that we are, including running businesses, doing all of these other things we're doing, working from home, please, let's do it, because it's time. And now is really the best time, because as you said before, Diane, with Corona and the Marshall Plan for Mothers has proven that we women have been pushed back at least 40 years in our empowerment in the last 12 months. Why? Because we have been forced to be at home. Sometimes, as we have also heard in this panel, with people who abuse us, right? So women have been stayed at home with abusers sometimes. Women have been stayed at home doing everything, the taking care of the kids, but in such extent with the homework, like some things my kids are doing, I feel frustrated because I don't know how to help them. And I see them sitting there frustrated at that computer, staring at that screen for hours a day, going nuts, right? And no education when it comes to sports, right? I can go run with them outside, but and that social connection, as Vivian mentioned before, right, is getting lost. So we are raising these computer kids, which actually 2 years ago, a lot of us were against, right? When all of these Roblox and these games came up, we said, no, we are not going to be these mothers. My kid doesn't have a phone every day. And look at us now. We are forced to put our kids in front of these screens, become unsocial, unable to properly express themselves. And actually, my sons, when they're in front of these screens, they don't talk much. They just listen. The teaching is not good. And I know our teachers try out their best, but still getting to a kid and their brains and get them motivated over online is difficult. And yes, some kids can do it, but most of them can't. And that is why we're failing. And that's a really big problem. And I agree with Vivian, we need to get them back to school. Then briefly, when we talk about the SDGs then, and also the ESGs, so investing into new forms of how to make this society better, is that yes, the Marshall Plan for Mothers would tackle at least SDG number one, poverty, because we have a lack of income, right? Number two, zero hunger. We have even a problem of people who cannot feed their kids or anyone in their household here in the UK. And then you get these organizations that the government pays and they send a banana which is black and all of these things. It has been in the papers, right? People in the UK know exactly what I'm talking about. Disgusting. I would not feed my kids with that. But some people don't have a choice. And that is not good, right? How do you want these little brains to function in front of these screens already all day if they don't have proper things to eat, right? So number two. Then three, good health and well-being, which includes mental health. Why do people not talk much about mental health? Why is there not much put in place for that? Because I think out of this pandemic comes a silent pandemic, which is the mental health illness pandemic. And we will all have a problem with that, not just the adults, but a lot of the kids too. Then we're talking about reduce inequalities, number 10, right? If you pay the mother to be at home, she will, it will just all be better, right? Can take better care of the kid. Don't need to think, oh my God, how do I pay my bills at the end of the month? And all of these other things. Gender equality as well, right? Men get paid to go to work. Now, good thing that came out of the pandemic, and I'm almost done, so thank you for bearing with me. But one good thing that came out of that, even my partner said it, holy bananas, it was an enlightenment to see what women do at home. Like for them not to be able to hide in their offices anymore and go for a drink or a pint after work with their clients and their friends from work was a revelation for them. And, being home and not just to kiss the kids goodnight or on the weekends to take them out to the park, but actually being there all the time because we mothers work too, was for a lot of them a moment of enlightenment. And I think that sets the tone. And that is your opportunity to help us change, because a lot of men who are home working are men in senior positions that we need, people who are there, who can push that button and make a difference. And then also, last but not least, 16, also peace and justice, also with institutions, right? If you pay mothers, the whole atmosphere, the mother will be more quiet, we will be more at peace with our lives, and everything we can do, we feel more valued. The mental health will help, and all of these things. And at the same time, we will be nicer with other people as well. Who knows, right? All of these things that trickle down with the mental health that comes with that, taking away these burdens of, will I be able to feed my kid? Will I be able to have an income? Will I be able to have all of these things? It changes a society completely if we support everyone really, truly as we should, starting with mothers at home and giving them what they're worth, raising future leaders of tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tessie, for the powerful messages and connecting SDGs on one big message. Charlie, over to you.
Wow, Tessie, you're amazing. I can listen to you all day. Just on that, and I think, so beautifully, described. I think there's one other thing I would add to that, and that horrible subject of who's going to pay for some of what we're trying to do here. With my commercial sort of and my social hat on, I'm thinking about it. And ESG is obviously a natural place for us to be drawn to. It's in the last year as well, and certainly through COVID, I think they've rollerballed a bit, and it's becoming much more significant for many of us, especially in private sector, where it's going to be a regulatory requirement on a number of fronts. that I think is where we can actually make a lot of change, because customers are going to vote with their feet. So we all here, all the people listening, we all have a responsibility in where we shop, what we buy, who we choose to engage with, and how we are going to control our habits. It's all very well us saying, I don't agree with this and I don't agree with that, but I will continue buying my coffee from there, and I will continue making those poor choices which perpetuate the scenario that we have now. Or we can actively own it and say, right, what am I going to do about this? Let's do a bit of research. Let's be a responsible consumer in everything we do. And that includes your mobile phone. You know, which mobile phone companies in certain countries are reaching out and leaving no one behind in terms of the access, who's providing that access, who's providing it to those young kids that can't afford necessarily, you know, to pay the extortionate charges, who is engaging there. And I think that's collectively where we can actually do more than we think we can, and where we can collaborate and be very powerful in the choice of our spends in whatever currency it is. So I think that's one thing. Don't underestimate the power of the purchasing power. And one of the lovely things I love about the generations that are being produced as we speak are the way they are voting and the way they are choosing where to work, where they want to work, how they want to work, and they want to know what that culture is, and what their vision is, and what that company represents. And I think certainly with what I've been getting involved with the ESGs quite a lot lately, as well as the SDGs. There's too many acronyms. And one of the things I really like about it is, you know, when you're procuring, every company should have a procurement process that says, what's your modern slavery policy? What's your approach to gender? Show me, demonstrate it. If I've got a choice of 3 and they're similar pricings, who meets those requirements? I mean, really basic stuff. But do you know, many people aren't doing this, and many organizations that represent and complain, if you actually, you know, look inside, you'll find some of it's a bit shaky. So I think we start at home and we make those decisions, we feed those out. And the other piece really was the tech and making sure it's accessible. So for me, I think I'm really passionate about that. Tech should be available to everybody, because that's a really good way of bringing people up and leveling the playing field. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Charlie. Marcia, what will be your comments on the overall topic?
Oh, such important commentary from my colleagues. And Tessie, I would definitely love a motherhood premium, and couldn't agree more about weaning our kids off of devices. That's really important. I've got small boys, and yeah, I was one of those moms that definitely we didn't have any devices, and forced to introduce that. And now now that, thank goodness, here in the United Kingdom, kids are back to school. It is awakening, because we're learning in the classroom and not necessarily just behind a screen. So I think as we need the connectivity for the world, we need to level up. I think that's really, really important, but we can't always think that we in the West have all of the answers, because there's some real quality family connections that are gained when you're not only just connecting via the internet. But I wanted to just say something about seeding the pipeline and having more women in STEM. So we have Elsevier, which is our science knowledge business. And my colleagues have introduced last year our 3rd gender report. It's free. It's on the RELX SDG Resource Center. It's called The Researcher Journey Through a Gender Lens. And one of the stats that I thought was really important was just what a tiny percentage of the patents in the world are put forward by women. So the average number of patents that men applied for range from about 1.1 times more to about 1.5 times more. So if that's a proxy for innovation, then we need to be encouraging and creating pathways so that there are more girls learning about coding and learning about the ways that they can become involved in science and technology. But I think some of it also depends on making it palatable. Women are naturally caregivers, and if it's abstract, then it's not maybe going to be as interesting. But in our case, if you're focusing on science and you want to bring women on board, you need to, it's a great way to encourage them by showing how you can be involved and help save lives and make improvements that way. I also just wanted to flag a piece of research that we did. I'm going to drink some water, which is these Sdg Graphics, and you can find them on the Resource Center as well. So for a period that a 5-year period that ended in 2019, we looked at 4 million publications that we thought aligned with the SDGs, and less than 40% of them actually included sex or gender factors. Unsurprisingly, the biggest share, 95% of this research, was related to SDG 5 on gender equality. But you need to apply this across the board, because a lot of these issues, you know, if we take something like clean water and sanitation, it was less than 5% of the publications actually had a gender perspective. So that's clearly not good enough, especially when we know that women do a lot of the heavy lifting, literally and figuratively, when it comes to water. So for us, we are able to provide these citable statistics, but we also, that's identifying the problem. We've also got to be part of the solution. So we have a program which is Research Without Borders. Tessie, I look forward to learning all about Professors Without Borders, which is about helping researchers, particularly in Africa, to be able to produce more of their own, publish more of their own stuff, learning about open access publishing, learning about you know, how to do that in an economically viable way. So I think it is about, you know, bringing that knowledge out, because these are women who are on the front line.
Thank you, Marcia. Time just flied as I would expect. So I'm going to address the last question. I had another pile of questions, but I will be able to ask only one more before we close, and also before your closing remarks. We have been discussing change for a long time now, and before the pandemic, we were discussing it, and now we are living in the middle of a pandemic. Again, we are discussing change, and after the pandemic, in the post-COVID world, we will be discussing that again. And in WHF, we have called 2021 as the year of hope. And we are promoting the global reset dialogue, how we are going to shape the future of humanitarian assistance and international development in this post-COVID world. So what do you think, and why do you think change is taking so long? Does post-COVID world, as we name global reset, provide an opportunity? What ways can we aim to build back better post-COVID in support of gender issues? Vivian, I would like to start with you, if you don't mind.
Thanks. I mean, I think you hear the phrase over and over again, build back better. We say it, we repeat it. What does that mean in practice? I think it truly means building back better. It's taking all of what we know hasn't exactly worked right, hasn't been equitable, hasn't been fair to women and girls, and changing the course of that. And so I think it starts with things like education, which we've discussed, extensively here. But I think it goes beyond that. I mean, it's been so incredible to hear these women, these strong, powerful, successful women talking so much about motherhood. And I think that there are very concrete steps that can be taken to this effect. Things like maternity leave, paid maternity leave. This is a responsibility of governments. This is very much a responsibility of the private sector. But for women to be able to take that pause and to step out into the role of motherhood without that fear of job loss or of having sabotaged their careers, and to be able to take that time at peace with themselves, knowing that they are going to nurture that next generation, and do so in a way that is acknowledged and valued both in country and in company, I think cannot be understated. I think that's one of the great global resets. I think this issue of working remotely, which does provide an enormous amount of flexibility and support, in particular to women, but I think fathers have also benefited from this, is an important reset as well. I think we've learned how to work and how to collaborate and how to be at home and be productive. I think the companies that take this forward, and many have already taken concrete steps to move this into longer term planning, will see the ability to retain and promote women workers in a way they perhaps hadn't in the past. And then again, I think in terms of the health field, the importance of primary healthcare, the importance of having frontline paid health workers, the importance of having resilient health systems, that requires investment from governments, and that requires investment from the private sector, and that requires investment from insurers to allow people to access these services. I think part of Building Back Better will be kind of a recalibration of where these investments and where these budgets go at local level as well as at national level, and how companies support their employees as well in access to quality services. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Charlie, why do you think change has and is taking so long?
I think perhaps because we've got to say, okay, when are we going to do it? Because we've been talking about it. And I think the incentives now, the financial piece is the piece, sadly, that is going to propel this forward. And I can see Sarah nodding her head. I think financially, and those, I think we're looking at budgets, that's going to force behavior. When people realize it's not negotiable, this is how it should be, this is how it is going to be, right, this is it. That forces behavior change. It's not, we've got to teach ourselves, and it's like flexing a new muscle. We've been talking about it now, let's just do it. We've got to, I guess, force that behavior in our peer groups, in our behaviors, in the companies we're in, everybody here, but also in those purchasing decisions that we talked about with the ESGs. I think that's a real key piece to it as well. Anyone who works within a regulated industry, again, there's an opportunity then to sort of insist on it happening. People working with the humanitarian sector, we can all make sure that happens. But I think it's calling it out. International Women's Day, the theme, choose to challenge. Let's challenge it. Let's do it. Let's say, let's ask the question. Let's ask those awkward questions. You can do it in a way that people will say, oh, I don't know. And it's like, well, hang on a second, I'm not comfortable doing that unless we, if you can force that to happen, I think that is going to cause that change to accelerate. And I think we can give the COVID piece as a reason why things haven't perhaps moved as quickly as we'd liked in the last year. But what it has allowed us to do is to look, stop, maybe take stock for some of us and others as well, to say, right, okay, this isn't good enough. It absolutely isn't good enough. I'm not going to accept substandard. This is what we deserve, and we deserve it for all our female brethren. So I think for me, it's very much, let's do it. Let's start flexing that muscle of actually doing it rather than just talking, which I'm pretty sure everyone on this panel is made of that muscle. So I think that's been part of it. I think political will is another one. And I think we're all very familiar with political will. I think politically governments have been imploding and fighting, and the infighting is just bizarre and nuts. And we just need to get to grip with real issues now, and everyone needs to stop messing around. It's playtime's over. Let's get on and solve this together. So I appreciate, I might not be a great politician though. So
thank you, Charlie. Diane, you're smiling over there, so over to you.
I was smiling. I think, at the core of this, we don't value the feminine traits enough. I think really, I don't know if you've read the Dasgupta report that came out. The UK government produced it on the economics of the climate change. And what they found is that we don't value the resources that the Mother Earth gives us. So in other words, we completely freely take whatever we want because it's free from the earth. Every time we move a shipping, and there's no tax for the ship, everything we're using from the ocean, everything we're using from the earth. And it's the same thing with women. What we give away free, we don't value. And that is the economic sinkhole. That is going to be our downfall. as a planet, as a civilization, if we don't figure out how to value what we are freely given in terms of care and nurture and love. And you know, I've gotten a lot of pushback on this when I brought it up on stages, that, you know, it's not a women's trait. The feminine traits are in both men and women. It's just the trait of caregiving and valuing that love and care that we all take for granted. So to me, it's pretty simple. And if the government needs to change policies, like Vivian pointed out. What about maternal health? Why is it that we say that youth are our future, but we don't value the people that are taking time off to actually produce the youth that are our future? So, you know, it needs to be changed quickly and rapidly again, but it is a point of valuing what we currently are taking for granted.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Diane. I would like to continue with the question as well as your closing remarks, because we are technically out of time from now on. Marcia, over to you. I know you might need to leave in a moment, so I would like to get your opinions on my last question about change, why it is taking so long, and your closing remarks.
Well, as you see, I really love statistics, and because they give us a sense of where we are. And last year, the World Economic Forum predicted that it would take, at the current trajectories, about 99 years to close the overall gender pay gap. Really, you know, this goes back to what the colleagues have been saying. But yet, in a 2020 study by S&P Global, firms that have female CEOs and CFOs have produced superior stock performance compared to the market average. And in the 24 months, according to this S&P Global study, post-appointment, female CEOs saw a 20% increase in the stock price momentum, and a female CFO saw a 6% increase in profitability and 8% larger stock returns. I mean, why wouldn't you do this? It's really, you know, these statistics are really interesting. But one of the challenges is, I think, something that the Secretary General of the OECD pointed out, in that 90 out of the 122 developing countries had entered a recession last year as the shutdowns to curb coronavirus hit sectors. And there was a $700 billion drop, they estimated, in external private finance due to a decline in foreign investment. This is in a great article, I'll put it in the chat, from Global Citizen, who's a partner on the Resource Center. But yet that was on top of an already $2.5 trillion annual funding gap that was estimated to meet the SDGs. So, you know, we've got to, if we care about this stuff, we have to walk the talk, and we also have to pay for it. But in my closing, I love what Sarah said about having side gigs. And as we've heard from all the colleagues, they're doing lots of fascinating things. And I have the great fortune to be the founder of a very small museum in London called Benjamin Franklin House. And there's a great quote of Benjamin Franklin that I really like, who was definitely he for she in the 18th century. And it is to perform without fail what you resolve, and to resolve to perform what you ought. So I think that's really important. And I encourage all of the women who may be listening to do that, and ask for all of the support from the men who may be listening as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely, I agree. If we are going to achieve gender equality, it has to be men and women working together on this. Really, not only women or not only men can do it. In COVID-19, we understood that without collaboration, Charlie has mentioned this, without partnership, we can't do anything individually. It has come to clear. Sarah, over to you.
So I think my feeling is we need to, you know, we're talking about environmental profit and loss, but let's do social profit and loss. Let's actually value the contribution that women are making. Let's value those female skills, you know, that often go unpaid. And, you know, there's an amazing book that I love called The Athena Doctrine. the subtitle is how women and the men who think like them will rule the future. And it basically lists the qualities that people want to see in their leaders. And they're all feminine qualities. It's all about vision. It's all about empathy, intuition, compassion, kindness. And I feel that if nothing else, this time of COVID, people have really stepped into those. For the first time, we've actually seen people in their whole lives. We've seen the kids walk in, the dog, the cat, the husband going, honey, what do I do with this? Do you know what I mean? And, you know, for the first time, we're seeing people in their roundness, in their wholeness. And before, I think it was too easy just to see people as the person they were in their job. And what is so incredible, and I, you know, love working with women. I love working with mums. They are the most efficient people in the planet. They are extraordinary. And like, you know, let's see people in their round for their full magnificence. And I think that's what we need to do going forward. And I feel that will change everything. And that's not a competition with men. You know, that really is like women, you know, bring so much to the table, and ultimately everyone benefits if women advance.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Tessie, over to you.
So I will just do some short advice and closing, not really answering the question anymore, because otherwise I get too excited again, because I'm not a woman of one sentence. I really get very passionate about this topic. But, you know, I always like closing my discussions and panels and so on with, you know, the young people online, right? Young girls, boys, men, adolescent girls, and so on, you know, and then what helped me really to be where I am today, and also to get my knowledge. And I think one thing that I would have loved for myself to be a little bit more when I was younger, but I was a little bit lazy. I was always outside and playing in the woods and all of that stuff. And yes, that's also a privilege, but I could have done more of reading, and I could have done more of podcasting. So guys, if you can, and I know some of you have podcasts here, you have mentioned it before, I have a podcast too. But if you can, go online and listen to podcasts. There's so much out there. And all of these topics, even talking about gender inequality, the gender lens, all of these keywords you have heard here today, you know, different other things, feminism, motherhood, everything you can imagine, also what is in your domain and your age as well as a young person, right? Also unemployment, big thing now, and all of these things. I think you find it on podcasts, and they really, really are helpful to understand and also cope with the challenges that we are having today at the moment, which obviously these panels do, but also when you can't be on a panel, go and podcast, because it's easy, it's on your phone. And if I would have known to just read more, because we didn't have podcasts, but just read more, I would have been even in an even better place now with my brain and with my opinion than I am now. So, you know, don't underestimate the time. It's gonna fly. So use it properly to make a change in this world, because we need you guys tomorrow when we are old and cripply, and need you to protect our rights too and what we have built. So that's all for me, and thank you so much for having me on this panel, and let's stay all in touch.
Thank you, Tessie. Thank you so much. Vivian, what will be your closing remarks?
Well, thanks so much for having us. I just have two kind of closing remarks. One of them is, I think it's really critically important that we all seek success, but that we define success in our own terms. And if success is having made it to school on time one morning, or having logged your children onto an online learning course, you know, effectively, like that's your success of the day. If your success is having effectively advocated for a policy change, even better. But I think we need to seek success and define it in our own terms, and then celebrate it. And my second kind of request, actually, more than closing remark, is I think that there are amazing women on this panel, as there are amazing women and men listening to us today. And I think we each have to make a commitment, a small commitment, to be a mentor to that younger generation of women. I think mentorship has been an underestimated and undervalued asset to women through their careers. And I think if each of us just said, we're going to find one, or maybe already have identified one young woman to mentor and to support and to lift up, we would be doing a great value to society and to that next generation. I'll stop there.
That's really a great commitment, and personally and as WHF, we are more than happy to support that initiative and commitment, and we will get back to you about what things we can do out there. Charlie, what are your last comments?
Beautifully said by my colleagues here on the panel, fellow panelists today. I mean, I've learned a lot just by listening to them. In fact, this is the sort of group where every time we have an interaction, I come away with the greater knowledge, and I just smile because I just think, how fabulous, aren't I lucky? And I think if you can do that, if you can come out of conversations, even ones that you don't necessarily want to have, that's fantastic. You come out with learning. Every day's a learning day. You know, just enjoy it. We're lucky to be here. You know, the pandemic's taught us anything. Get out there, embrace it, enjoy it. But also think, what do you want to leave behind? What do you want your legacy to be? Do you want to be, you know, Diane, Charlie, you know, for the person who helps someone lift them up? I want someone to smile when they think of me when I'm not here. And I think that's my objective. And be that, I want my nephew to grow up and be you know, an empowerer of women. I mean, how proud would you be of that? You know, and I think in a business sense, I think just reinforcing the commitment of, let's ask those questions, let's force the conversation, let's help those, let's be a mentee and a mentor, and actually, you know, just be positive as well, because we could all look at this negatively, and by talking about it positively, you create momentum. And if you're not sure, ask, and yeah, choose to challenge. And those uncomfortable conversations, challenging, you learn so much from it. So yeah, go for it. And if I can be of any help, please contact me.
Thank you so much, Charlie. And over to you, Diane.
Well, I just echo what everyone said here. And it's an intergenerational effort. And what I'm going to put on my grandmother hat. I'm not old and decrepit and creaky knees like Tessie pointed out, but I definitely have a lot of mentors, a lot of resources, and I have a lot of contacts, and I have a lot of connections. And when I partner with the youth, I extend my life. So that's the key, not just encouraging them, not just, patronizing them, but open up your Rolodex, old Rolodex. I know that's very old school, but open up your contacts, open up your resources, bring them into and then you actually extend the potential for us to affect change. So that's what I would end with. We have to do it. So thank you all, you amazing ladies. What an honor.
Thank you all so much, Marcia, Charlie, Tessie, Diane, Vivian, Sarah. You have been great, and thank you to all the attendees. We have extended the time, and hope you enjoyed this discussion. There will be on demand on our YouTube channel just straight after this webinar. So if you couldn't watch it all, it will be there. As I said, thank you so much. I'm just speechless, and I don't know really what to say further. In WHF, we are very blessed to have you all on our advisory board, and you have great contributions, as all the attendees could see. And we look forward to carrying on the discussions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you
Take
soon.
care.